micro iDSD Black Label is renowned in the audiophile community. It has a big, powerful mobile DAC amp that can drive headphones and stereo speakers alike, and it's $600 MSRP. iFi has a smaller alternative. It's the Nano iDSD Black Label. I think my definition of Nano is a little different from iFi's. iFi reached out to me several weeks ago and asked if I would like to review any of their products, and of course, I said yes. They sent me the Nano and a balanced IE match cable, which will both be sent back in about 30 days. What do you lose when stepping down from the big micro to the not-so-nano nano? There are a number of things you won't find on the iFi Nano. First, there is no RCA or SPDIF output and no quarter-inch headphone jack. If you want to send signal out, it's got to be done only through one of three 3.5mm jacks. The three jacks are for IE match, direct headphone out, and a line out. Second, the supported audio formats are a little different. The micro supports up to DSD-512, whereas the Nano supports only DSD-256. The micro accepts PCM up to 768 kHz, while the Nano is limited to 384 kHz. However, both products support MQA. Third, there is a significant power difference. On high gain, the micro provides 4 watts into 16 ohms. The Nano outputs 200 milliwatts into 15 ohms. At 32 ohms, the Nano provides 285 milliwatts, and at 600 ohms, the Nano sends a measly 20 milliwatts. Fourth, the micro has 3D and bass filter switches. The Nano does not, but adopts a different filter. On the Nano, you get the listen or measure digital filters. In practice, the measure filter elevates the treble just slightly and seems to add a bit more frequency separation, leading towards a marginally more airy presentation. The key word here is marginal. The listen filter elevates the bass and pulls back the treble. Again, this is a very small change. There is no option to not have a filter active. You'll always have either the listen or measure filter activated. On the micro, you can toggle the filter switches on at the same time or off at the same time. On the Nano, you have to choose which one you want to use, and you will always be required to choose one. The micro has additional filter options on the bottom. For example, you can switch between IE match settings. You have the option to switch gain. You can switch polarity. You can toggle between bit perfect, minimum phase, and standard digital filters. The Micro and Nano apparently use the same Burr Brown 1793 DAC chip. However, on the Micro you get 2 and the Nano gets just 1. The Micro has an option to charge your mobile devices and the Nano does not. Finally, there are marginal battery life differences as well. The Nano has a 10-hour battery and the Micro a 12-hour battery. Of course, your mileage is going to be different depending on volume, impedance, filters, and connection. In my experience, the Micro gets about 10 hours of continuous use when not in turbo mode. The Nano seems to get it fairly close to the 8-hour mark. Here's the thing. iFi provides 2 vastly different products. You can see why the Micro is a prosumer amp DAC. Its plethora of filters, connections, outputs, and support for all high-resolution audio formats is a die-hard audiophile fantasy come true. On the other hand, the Nano provides a simple amp DAC that retains key features normal audiophiles might find compelling. This includes support for high-resolution files such as DSD and MQA, IE match, basic filters, and the same DAC chipset. In other words, where the Micro is definitely overkill for many, the Nano is just enough for the rest. The Nano is dead silent. Let's just get that out of the way. Whether I used IE match or direct output, I heard no noise or hiss or distortion. With sensitive IEMs like the Campfire Audio Andromeda, there was a completely black background. Connecting the Nano requires one cable, the cable included in the box. It is plug-and-play functionality with Windows and Mac OS. For Android, you'll need an OTG cable adapter. For iOS, you'll also need an adapter for the Lightning port. In my initial tests, I used the Andromeda and Allo Audio S4R. The Andromeda is 12.8 ohms and the S4R is 32 ohms. I used both my FLAC library and Amazon Music HD for high-resolution streaming. There is very slight channel imbalance right after you turn on the Nano. The knob is in the off position around 9 o'clock. The imbalance occurs between 9 and 10 o'clock. Once you get to 10 o'clock, the channels become balanced. The imbalance occurred out of both the direct and IE match jacks. The Nano has a bass emphasis. It is not boomy or overbearing. but those who are used to Sabre or AKM DACs will notice an immediate difference. There is some sub-bass and mid-bass melding, and the separation isn't anywhere close to reference quality. In Mountains by Hans Zimmer, the sub-bass rumble is present but not overbearing. It becomes apparent within seconds of starting the song. Switching between the measure and listen filter created a very slight difference. On measure, the Nano had about a 2 decibel leaner bass presence. Halfway into the song there is a crescendo. The Nano did not get muddy or distorted when all the instruments were playing. The bass did not overtake the mids. In Pure Water, the Nano has what I would call a perfect mix of bass thump and vocal clarity. The bass did not have fast transients, but lingered for about a second or two, giving emphasis to the vocals. The mids were crystal clear and the sparkle was present. There was no harshness or sibilance. Again, switching between the measure and listen filter resulted in very marginal differences. I frankly struggled to hear the alterations on Pure Water. In Want You Back by Haim, the Nano presented the vocals clearly without harshness. The natural sibilance of the primary vocalist was controlled, permitting energy but not ear-piercingness. The piano and guitar were not muddy. The drums still cut through the mix without sounding muffled. Switching to the measure filter created a very slight elevation in treble and a sense of airiness. I mean, by very marginal standards. In Scherzo for X-Wings, the Nano really showed what the Burr Brown DAC should be known for. This song is an orchestral piece with horns and brass that can become very harsh. The Nano kept the energy of these instruments without letting them become sibilant or ear-piercing. You can still hear that energy even at lower volumes. The digital filters in this song did, well, nothing. I could not hear any noticeable alteration in the sound from measure to listen. I toggled back and forth but could not locate whatever change that was supposed to happen. I repeated the songs using the Andromedas. The signature was the same on every song, and once again, the filters seemed to have a very slight effect, if any. Using the IEMs through IE match might be beneficial if you have very sensitive earbuds. There is noticeable attenuation between IE match and direct output. I never found any need to use IE match with my Andromeda since the volume pod is accurate enough and turns smoothly. The sound character is exactly the same between the IE match and direct output. The only difference is the lower volume output from IE match. I briefly compared the Nano to the Micro, and I have to say the sound character without filters engaged is essentially the same. I say essentially because the Micro has a ridiculous amount of power. That immediate power will have a different effect on headphone drivers. I found that the S4R had optimum driver performance at lower volume on the Micro than on the Nano. The filters are quite different as well. Whereas the filters on the Micro are noticeable and in my opinion perfectly tuned, the filters on the Nano are not particularly helpful. Throughout my test, I struggled to hear the differences between measure and listen on the Nano. Initially, I thought this might be a defect in the unit iFi sent me. I did a bit of research online and discovered that others experienced the same as I have. It appears that other people heard a marginal at best change in the filters. This is rather disappointing. I like iFi for many reasons, and one of those reasons is the sublime implementation of filters, but the Nano seems to have fallen through the cracks. I wish iFi had used the same filters as on the Micro, or barring that, included a 3.5mm line input instead of the filter switch. The fact that one of the features doesn't really do anything is unfavorable. On the other hand, there are plenty of people who will not use the filters, even on the Micro. Many will prefer to control changes using EQ on their source. And if you're that type, then the barely existent filters on the Nano won't be an issue. I like Burr Brown DACs. There are not enough of them. iFi is the only major manufacturer that uses Burr Brown, and I'm thankful they do. If you want a more natural, slightly relaxed sound signature, Burr Brown DACs provide that. The Nano is no competitor to the Micro. There is no danger that the cheaper product will cannibalize the more expensive one. The Micro aims at a more professional market, or at least those who know that they need the additional functionality. The Nano provides the same sound signature as the Micro, but without the frills. Moreover, in the past, I conducted thorough tests between the Micro and Chord Mojo. I said that the differences between the two devices was slight at best, and they sounded alike. I also briefly compared the Mojo to the Nano, and the sound is virtually the same. The Mojo has more power at lower impedance than the Nano, but at high impedance of 150 ohms and more, the two devices seem to provide very similar power output. Clearly, the Mojo has features that the Nano simply doesn't. The Mojo's additional connection options might be relevant for some. And the Mojo's cute yet confusing glowing orbs user interface is unique. But there's much to be said regarding the Nano's simple, intuitive, unpretentious interface as well. But if you're talking sound alone, then the Mojo and Nano sound very similar. Chord fans will bristle at that. Oh well, life goes on. So, if you're looking for something that sounds like the Micro at a cheaper price, and if you want the experience of the Mojo's sonic character without the gimmicks and frustrating issues Chord adds on top, then the iFi Nano iDSD Black Label is an excellent option to consider. It could do with a shorter name though. Still, it's about 300 times better than Sony's naming conventions.